When I was a kid, we played cops and robbers. What we didn't play was cops and prostitutes. Maybe I missed out on that special game when I was a kid. And what is it with Suffolk County and police officers in New York and prostitutes? And why do we have to question whether or not the Long Island serial killer could himself be a police officer? Now, technically, this episode of my show is about a book series. I do a long-form book series on the cases that I follow. I'm following the Long Island serial killer, Rex Heuermann, Gilgo Beach murderer, allegedly Rex Heuermann, and I'm following that case on my channel, Devil's Advocates. And one of the things that I do is I take books related to the cases or documentaries and I break them down in detail. This is part of a long series, basically deep diving. It's like an audio book on steroids, although I don't read you the entire book word for word. I take select portions out of it. And that's what we're going to do today. This video takes a little bit of time. It's got a lot to cover, but I want to get into a few things about the book before we get started. There's a connection in the Long Island serial killer story of Rex Heuermann that seems to keep tying itself together with police officers, New York police officers who may have known Rex Heuermann, may have possibly covered up for Rex Heuermann. And that sounds absolutely crazy because who believes that police officers get involved with that kind of stuff? But as I'm reading through this book, I'm seeing more and more ties to police officers. Different documentaries on Netflix have come out tying in police officers. It's something we cannot ignore. Now, one thing I want to say about this book, The Lost Girls by Robert Kolker, is that the reason why I picked it up is it's considered a foundational piece for understanding the Gilgo Beach murders. It's the reason why I started with this book, is that it was recommended as the foundational piece. In fact, a lot of the documentaries coming out right now use this book as the primer to their documentary. Now, the problem is I didn't notice, and you'll notice on the title if you're looking here, is there's this part about, it says, the lives of the victims of the Long Island serial killer. And for a large part of this book, nearly half of the book so far that I've seen, it's literally stories about the victims themselves and their families and how they grew up and what their great-great-grandparents did and what jobs they had and who they knew in school and so on and so on. And I don't want to diminish the victims in the story, nor do I want to be accused once again of being a misogynist, like I don't love women because somehow I hate all women and that's the reason I want to pass up on the women's story. None of that shit is true, despite what people will say from time to time. Every once in a while I have somebody calling me a misogynist and it drives me nuts. I've always been a defender of women my whole life. Side rant over. Point being is that if I want to gloss over about half this book, as I'm intending to do, it's because I found it extremely tedious. I'm going to show you the table of contents real quick and explain this why. Here's book one, and it's different people's names for the chapters talking about their particular story leading up to them being found as a victim of the Gilgo Beach murderer. We're led to believe one killer did all these murders. Now, my show in particular is focusing on the possibility that these were not all Rex Heuermann's murders. They may have been some of Rex Heuermann's murders, but they may not have all been Rex Heuermann's murders. And in fact, we have to ask, how many serial killers may be involved? Is there any connection to the police in the area? Because there is lots of outcoming information about police involvement, either possible police officers who may have themselves been killers or have purposely had connections with a serial killer and taken the steps to cover that up. And again, while that sounds crazy and salacious, when I see those kind of things, I can't let that shit go. But once again, you'll notice that section 1 here had about 5 names. Section 2 had about 5 names. We have an interlude, and then we get to this book 2 where there's bodies, right? And I will tell you that 40-something% of the book is those chapters. And while I read some of that from my opening chapter, what I realized when I was reading the rest, getting ready for the next chapter, was it was so dry and boring. And again, not to disrespect the families, but I don't need to know who your brother's uncle's cousin's third nephew is and what school they went to. And that's a lot of what that was. Just like the title of this book says, the lives of the subtitle, the lives of the victims of the Long Island serial killer. And so I understand that the author wanted to humanize the victims. I get that entirely. But for our show and our purposes, we're focused on the murders themselves, not everything about who they knew and who their friends were in high school. And again, that's not to disparage the victims. It's to focus on the part which is, let's find the killer now. And if I thought it was relevant, and that's the problem, if I thought it was relevant to know who their brother's sister's cousin's uncle was, I would be covering that. But as I was reading through it, I could see no way this was ever going to tie into the story. And if it does later, we'll go back and read those chapters in detail as I realize, oh, this is why he covered it. But I have a feeling we're never going to get there. All right, I spent way too much on the preamble. It's 5 minutes in. You may have already tuned this out. Let's get right into the book. And I'm going to, again, my style is, I'm going to read you yellow highlights on the screen. We're going to talk about it as thoughts come to my mind. So it's kind of like that. I've highlighted the sections that brought thoughts to my mind, and we'll go through it together. It's kind of like a book on steroids. You buy the book. I recommend you buy the book. Give this author his money for the book if you don't mind, or if you don't want to grace them with cash because you think they're capitalizing on a murder, then just watch this and you'll be able to kind of get the gist from my perspective. All right. They found 3 more just like it 2 days after the first, 4 sets of bones in all. Each was a full skeleton, kept whole and shrouded in burlap. This is the alleged Gilgo 4. 4 bodies were found together in one location of Gilgo Beach when they were starting to look for Shannan Gilbert. Shannan Gilbert is kind of the way that the whole discovery of bodies of the Long Island serial killer began. They were looking for a woman who called 911 in a panic, asking for help, saying that someone was trying to kill her. She went missing, and in the process of looking for Shannan Gilbert, they found a bunch of bodies. Shannan was not one of those bodies, ironically enough. Later on, someone will remark that maybe Shannan's disappearance was simply to bring light to the Gilgo Beach killer, which she was not allegedly in that pack. So let's continue on. Each had been placed in an odd specificity, staggered at roughly 1/10 of a mile interval along the edge of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach. Right away, both the array of the bodies and the care given them seemed deliberate, precise, and methodical. Now, when we go along, I want you to pay attention to the way that the bodies are discovered and the different types of bodies that are discovered. Because again, part of the story is going to be that although the MO seems to be completely different on many of the victims, it's the same killer that is evolving. Now, that's the question we have to ask ourselves at the end of the day. Is this one killer evolving and changing their tactics very, very drastically? Or is there more than one killer? Are they trying to too easily wrap up some old cold cases by throwing them all into Rex Heuermann? And at the end of the day, maybe you don't care. Maybe you're like, who cares if they attribute the wrong person? Because again, at the end of the day, my problem with any of these cases isn't so much trying to get the bad guy off. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do is make sure that the bad guy who did it doesn't walk free because he took the easy answer. So if there's another killer on the loose and we just stop looking for that killer because we're going to tie it to somebody that was the easy mark, that's a problem with me. So, convinced that at least one of them was Shannan, they were looking for Shannan Gilbert, the police searched Joe Brewer's house and seized his car. Now, again, early on, Shannan called. She had gone to Joe Brewer's house, I believe, as an escort, answering a Craigslist call, whatever, went there as to do an act of prostitution. All of the victims have been prostitutes or involved in the sex trade of some kind. Maybe the prostitute's not the right word, but in the sex trade, trading favors for money. Shannan was one of them. Joe Brewer was a house that she had gone to. That's why his name's coming up. And police were looking for Shannan. They ended up, after they found bodies, they go to Joe Brewer's house, seize his car. They're looking for evidence. All right. I'm innocent in this case, Brewer said. So the truth is on my side. Brewer claimed to have taken a polygraph, and while the police didn't describe the results or confirm right away that he had submitted to the test, they also didn't declare Brewer a suspect or a person of interest. So why it's important, all throughout this story, you're going to see police officers who don't do due diligence, who maybe never looked into certain people, who maybe did or didn't polygraph certain people. That is where the key comes in. Lots and lots of evidence will show later on that police were not looking hard, and in fact looking to exonerate or cover up for police officers that were peripherally involved with the disappearance of prostitutes or sex workers. That's where it gets really sketchy. All right, police talked to Michael Pack. That was the driver of Shannan Gilbert. There was an individual named Michael Pack who said that he drove Shannan Gilbert to this appointment with Joe Brewer. So that's why these names are coming up here. If you haven't seen some of that, you can watch some of my earlier videos about that or watch any of the documentaries that cover this stuff in detail. So the police talked to Michael Pack, too, picking him up and driving him out to the headquarters on Long Island and interrogating him for a better part of a day. Like Brewer, Michael Pack, I believe, would say that he passed his polygraph. Unlike Brewer's, his name didn't leak out to the papers. The police wouldn't charge him with anything, nor would they declare him a suspect. So these individuals claimed that they had been polygraphed by the police. That has not apparently been proven, whether they have or they haven't. When reporters learned that there was no security video of that night, they wondered why the police hadn't cared enough to recover the footage right away. So there's what this is indicating, and this is why it's important, is that security footage, what's kind of not being understood in that paragraph is that it sounds like there was security cameras, but when reporters went to say, well, let's take a look at the security footage on those cameras, they said that there was no video from that night. So now reporters want to know why the police didn't care enough to recover the video footage that was available. That's a whole bunch of shit that's not being said in that sentence, in that paragraph, which I think we're missing, because it just kind of like, it doesn't hit home. Let me read it one more time to you. When reporters learned that there was no security video for that night, they wondered why police hadn't cared enough to recover the footage right away. It makes it sound like there wasn't any footage, but really that sounds like there was footage. Police didn't recover it. That's the key. That is the key. Why didn't police recover the footage? It's not that there wasn't footage. That's what I'm reading it. It's that police didn't recover that footage, and reporters wanted to know why. And why, after a girl went screaming down the road and two neighbors dialed 911 because Shannan Gilbert ran down the street, knocking on people's doors, screaming for help, calling 911. All of that stuff's happening before she disappeared. They want to know why anyone in the Oak Beach Island Association, where she was running from, would allow the memory on their hard drive to be wiped clean. So, again, the paragraph doesn't hit home enough what's happening. Security cameras did capture things that happened that night. The police never recovered it. People apparently don't have video footage of it anymore, leading reporters to wonder, what the fuck? Who wouldn't, on a missing girl, keep the video footage around about her showing up on their doorstep? Why didn't police get that? Now the question has to be asked. This is the implied. Did police get video footage from people, and did they cover it up and say they don't have video footage? That's the million-dollar question that's not being said by this paragraph. Certainly there has to be video footage. Police say there isn't any video footage. How can that be? Well, when you see that there's cops that are implicated in this story, you begin to wonder, well, maybe did cops cover up something? We'll get there. With no video evidence, reporters requested Shannan's 911 call recording. When police refused to release it, so police are saying there's no footage of Shannan. When they call 911, police refuse to release the 911 call. What the fuck's going on with the police hampering this investigation? No one knew that she had been bounced from jurisdiction to jurisdiction for the better part of half an hour. Shannan's family filled the vacuum. Mari told reporters that she had heard about a moment, that Mari's an individual in the story that's related to Shannan Gilbert, that she had heard about a moment in the recording when Shannan says, "You're trying to kill me." Cher said the tape showed that Shannan had been trying to get away from someone. The police weren't in a hurry to confirm anything. Suffolk County Inspector Jared McCarthy acknowledged that Shannan intimates that she's being threatened, but he also described Shannan on the tape as drifting in and out of intoxicated, concluding that there's, quote, nothing to indicate that she's a victim of a crime on these calls, other than screaming, "He's trying to kill me," and she's on the phone with police for some time, running away. But there's no indication that she's a victim of any crime. Do you not see why people are like, why is the police story doesn't seem to make sense? No indication that there's a crime being committed, and she must have been drunk and intoxicated, so nobody took her seriously. Cher or Cherie, I wish I got to get these names right. I feel like I'm doing a disservice because I didn't realize as I get into these stories, I'm going to have to keep every name in this story has got some pronunciation I don't understand, like Islip instead of Islip, and Suffolk instead of Suffolk, and all the, like, everything I'm pronouncing, people are like, "Oh my God, you're pronouncing it wrong." I'm not from the New York area, and I don't know these people, and I need to get better at doing it. I will work on it, by the way, because I do want to get it right, especially if I'm going to keep hearing these names over and over again. I got to get it right. So I'm working on it. Give me some little bit of break. At least 3 witnesses had seen Shannan screaming and running, and the police still weren't acknowledging that there had been a crime. So again, there are multiple people who saw Shannan, heard Shannan knocking on doors, screaming for help, running around, saying somebody's trying to kill her. She's on 911, and there's police saying, we don't have any footage from that night, and we really weren't all that concerned. We don't think there was a crime here. That, my friends, should raise red flags. Off the record, the police confirmed that they were working under this assumption that they were all escorts. So they're talking about the 4 bodies now. So they're off the record, police confirmed they were working under the assumption that they were escorts or sex workers. The police and the press scoured open missing person cases, and within a day, on December 14th, another name surfaced: Megan Waterman of Portland, Maine, last seen in June at a hotel in Hauppauge, about 15 miles from Oak Beach. That night on CNN, Nancy Grace, Nancy Grace, why is she still a thing? But anyways, that night on CNN, Nancy Grace conducted a live remote interview with Megan's mother. This gets disgusting, in my opinion. In her clipped New England accent, Lorraine Waterman said that the police had contacted her about the case that day, and she expected they'd be coming to her for a DNA sample. Megan's mother answered barely 3 more questions before Nancy Grace, cut her off, rhapsodizing about Lorraine, what Lorraine must be going through. So in Nancy Grace's fashion, as she always does, Nancy Grace is more interested in telling a fascinating story. And oh my God, look at me, I'm going to say something amazing. And everybody's going to oh, I can't believe. And she does all these faces and she gets all into it. And so she's got the mother of a victim on here and she just shits on, cuts her off. I got something to say. I'm going to make this dramatic. So she says, and when I think about what those mothers are going through, like the mom that's just joining us tonight, this could possibly be her daughter that she's loved and nurtured for almost 3 years. And now she's waiting to find out whether one of those skeletal remains is going to be her daughter. So Nancy Grace cuts off the mother trying to talk about the situation and starts going into pitching the sensationalism. This is a mother of a woman. She's waiting to find out if her daughter will be one of the bodies. Bum, bum, bum. Watch me. I'm Nancy Disgrace. Just whatever. Borrowed that line from somebody else. Thank you very much. All right. Lorraine's interview was crowded out by speculation from a psychologist, a former deputy medical examiner, Howard Oliver, opining about the limitations of analyzing old bones found on a beach, legal correspondent Juan Cesares, see, I got to get the names right, stating obviously that the crime scene investigations are launching what I believe is going to be a massive, massive homicide investigation. What they're trying to say is all of these experts that CNN likes to assemble to bring in and do mouthpieces about shit. What's more important is all of the mouthpieces coming in and telling us all the speculation about the case that's just starting. When you got the mother right in the wings, trying to tell the story. Anyways, so they got all these other people opining already, making speculations about a serial killer or whatever in the area, about this massive homicide investigation. CNN reporter Rupa Michelini, fuck. Why is everybody's name so difficult to pronounce in this story? Michelini. I feel like I should know this. I watch enough CNN. I should know this one. Anyways, live from Long Island, reporting that all 4 of the bodies have very different levels of decomposition. When in a segment from Ocean Parkway, one police officer said that Long Island might be the home to a serial killer, and Nancy Grace breaks in. Hello, she said. It's a serial killer. It's the same man who killed all 4 women, and there's probably more. Nancy Grace has already broken the story. Nancy Grace has already solved the problem. Anytime Nancy Grace gets involved, she knows exactly what happened, and she's got, hello, I know everything. I'm Nancy Grace. I know everything already. Hello. Her condescending bullshit makes me trigger. That's why I'm triggering on camera. She triggers me with her fucking, when she does, I've seen her do the hello. Of course, it's the way I think it is every time, all day. So now we're talking about Steve Levy, who brought Dormer. That's, Dormer is an individual commissioner who gets brought in just before the case basically gets turned over to James Burke, I believe. Dormer's on his way out. He's 60-something years old. He's going to finish his career, one last stint as a commissioner. So Steve Levy brings back Dormer as the commissioner. This is starting a story that's going to get important and going to get interesting. Steve Levy had switched parties. This is just a side rant. Steve Levy had switched parties from Democrat to Republican in an ultimately unsuccessful run for the governor's office. And now the district attorney, a Democrat, was investigating Levy for misuse of campaign funds. This kind of shit is just a complete aside about our American political system. when a person just decides to switch their political party from Democrat to Republican so they can have a more successful run at the governor's office, it tells you everything you need to know about American politics. None of these motherfuckers give a shit about what they're actually saying. The party affiliation is just a ruse. This is all bullshit. If people are deeply convicted about being a Democrat or Republican, they wouldn't just switch parties to give them a better chance at the governorship. That's all this is about. Trump switched parties. People switch parties all the time. They switch parties because there's a better chance of them winning the election, which means their platforms are dick. It doesn't mean shit. American politics is a joke. Side rant over. All right. And then he gets investigated for misuse of campaign funds. Yeah, because anybody who has no moral integrity, who just switches political parties, complete different ideologies, and switches it to run for governor, doesn't give a fuck about misusing public funds. It's all about something else. It's not about your moral convictions. I thought I was done with the rant. Let's move on. Dormer, who was turning 70, this is an old guy now, expected to serve one final quiet year and cap off his long career with dignity. And then Dormer has to give a press conference about these new bodies being found. And this is where, the shitstorm begins. I don't think it's a coincidence that 4 bodies ended up in this area, he said. In the same breath, he almost tried to wish it away. I don't want anyone to think that we have a Jack the Ripper running around Suffolk County with blood dripping from a knife, Dormer blinked, which might be the impression that some people would get. He trailed off. This is an anomaly, he said. Don't worry. So Dormer, on his way out, hints that, gosh, I hope people don't think this is a serial killer. That would be horrible on my way out, that you got a serial killer that's on the loose as I'm trying to leave. Anyways, it wouldn't be long before on TV and in print, criminologists and self-styled serial killer experts would start speculating whether the killer ritualistically cleaned the bones of flesh before shrouding them in burlap and placing them at careful intervals along the highway. Many of the bones were so carefully decomposed that it wasn't clear at first whether all 4 sets of remains had been female. Now, the only reason I highlighted this is because, again, as a YouTuber, people bust the balls of myself and other YouTubers for getting involved in things that we shouldn't do, that we're just speculating. And yet that's all these people do. TV and in print, criminologists, self-styled serial killer experts, everyone is, quote, speculating, that's the key word, speculating whether the killer ritualistically cleaned bones, all these different speculations. And again, the sore spot for me is it's usually in Americans' eyes okay for CNN to speculate all day long and just guess at shit and bring on people that are just guessing and speculating all day long, because that's news. But if I do it, I'm a piece of shit for getting into an area that I shouldn't, and I'm just coming up with wild speculations. The media does wild speculations all the time as well, and one can argue I'm media, what I'm doing. I just don't have the name CNN behind my name, but I'm not doing anything different. We come up with ideas, we think about those ideas, we research those ideas, and we report on those ideas. And it's speculation sometimes, yes, but it's no different what I'm doing than what they're doing, but somehow they get a grace period. A sister of Mari's back in Pennsylvania, Lori Grove, brought up that the police hadn't made it to Oak Beach until over an hour after the start of Shannan's 911 call. So that's another thing that happened in here. Shannan, Gilbert calls the police, and it takes them forever. It takes them over an hour to arrive to look into and when they get there, she's missing, so they just give up. Oh, man, fuck it, she's gone. Who cares? Hook her. If somebody had gotten there within 10 or 15 minutes, my niece most likely would be alive, she said. She was on the phone with police for more than 20 minutes. Why did no one get there? Well, again, because the story will be rife with police not caring and not looking into disappearance of sex workers, because police may actually be using sex workers. Believe it or not, that's what the story will tell us. I'm looking at the clock and going, wow, I'm a little behind on this. Let's try to push this up. Only when the first heavy snows came just after Christmas did police bring the search to a halt. The plan was to come back after the first spring thaw, before new foliage had a chance to grow. So again, law enforcement's looking for Shannan Gilbert. They're finding other bodies, but they call off the search because it's getting to be winter. Now it's December and snow is starting to fall. And like, you know what? Let's put the whole thing on hold. Horrible for the families who want to, time is of the essence, but they're going to put everything on hold now. Like, let's come back in the spring and look again. The people of Oak Beach had a reprieve, albeit a temporary one. The investigation entered a quiet period. No arrests, no confirmed identities for the bodies. No more daily police updates from Oak Beach. Dormer, the commissioner, created a task force with 3 supervisors and a dozen detectives, including specialists in cell phone technology and computer forensics. The task force sought advice from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit in Quantico, and in February, a team of federal investigators spent a few days touring the sites, looking at the evidence and sitting around a table to brainstorm. Through most of January, they refused to speak publicly about the case. If they found a clue or a suspect, they weren't saying. Now, what you're going to find out is James Burke, a corrupt cop, or allegedly a corrupt cop, who, well, okay, not allegedly, he went to jail later, so I guess we can safely say he was a corrupt cop. He will get appointed to chief of police, and he will dismantle this task force, including the FBI, to stop looking into the Gilgo Beach murder. And one will see why, I think, as the story progresses. Producers for cable TV news have a stable of pundits that they turn to during hot crime stories. Medical examiners, criminologists, forensic scientists, former prosecutors, and the serial killer category has its own roster of sub-specialists ready to chime in on what they could learn from the bones exposed to weather for 18 months or longer, and what the burlap and the location might say about the killer's signature. So in other words, CNN, like a lot of places, have a stable of people they go to. Oh, we have a hot case, a serial killer case. Let's call in half a dozen people that we have regularly on the show to be a mouthpiece and just run their ideas ad nauseum. And again, if I do that kind of thing, I'm not treated the same. All right, I'm off that soapbox. I'll just climb back down off the soapbox and continue on. They could fill the airtime. They could fill the airtime talking about how Gary Ridgway was called the Green River Killer because he buried his victims in shallow graves near the river of that name in the state of Washington, and how Dennis Rader became BTK, and when it came out that he was bound, tortured, and killed his victims. In other words, when a new story comes up, they resurface old stories because it gives them something to talk about every day, So they just bring up the old stories and keep talking about them every day because it gives them new material to cover in a 24-hour news station. I get it. I totally do. Anyways, it's a calling card, explained Vernon Gilbert, a retired commander for the Bronx Homicide, from Bronx Homicide, who has become something of a scholar of serial killers. Based on the placement and reported condition of the bodies, Gilbert told New York Times that he was convinced the killer was a local, familiar with the area. He has a reason to be there. He said the biggest thing on his mind now is whether or not he's going to be linked. It's going to be linked to this, right? And so I have no problem with people doing this kind of stuff. That's what I do as well. I look at the story and I start asking questions. Oh, if this is the case, then what is this? And if this is the case, what is this? The difference between me and them sometimes is that I ask questions media will not ask. Like they won't go too far down why are there so many police officers involved with the disappearance of women? They don't want to ask those questions. They have a relationship with law enforcement. If they want to get on news and get coverage and inside information about crimes, they're gonna have to stay friendly with the police department. So they are inclined to play ball with the police department and not report, hey, why are there a bunch of cops involved with prostitutes? What's up with that? They don't want to go there. So that's what my job is. That's where I bridge the gap between mainstream media and everything else. Gilbert wasn't alone in that opinion. As early as the first week, CNN was airing speculation that the killer was a clam fisherman, not calm. Maybe he was calm. Clam fisherman who could come to the barrier island undetected from the Great South Bay. Gilbert went deeper with the idea on his media rounds, suggesting to the Daily News that the killer had placed the bodies so that he could find them again, returning to the burial ground to relive the murders for sexual gratification. Again, some of these stretches, and they get repeated over and over again. They're just, I'm going to go on every talk show and I'm going to tell you how I think he's coming back to the crime scene to relive his sexual gratification. There's no indication there was any sexual gratification at this point, but he's going to go ahead and speculate that and then talk about it over and over again. And then the media will report it, and then people in the public will start to say, yeah, I'm pretty sure it has a sexual element. I heard that he was going back to the crime scenes for sexual gratification. That's because somebody rambled off that idea and repeated it over and over again until it's stuck in the narrative. Sorry, guys. Others concurred that the killer was every bit as systematic and intentional as Joel Rifkin, another killer, that his need for intimacy announced itself in the care that he took, that he shrouded them in burlap, protecting them from the elements, that he seemed to want to control every aspect of their lives through their deaths and continue the relationship with them past death. So this, again, someone's speculating the reason why these victims are found in bags is because he wants to preserve them. He wants to come back. He wants to relive. He wants to control them, not only in their life and in their death, but after their death as well, by putting them in bags and making his little trophies. All pure speculation. And at the end of the day, I will make speculations as well. I'm just trying to point out that their speculations are no better, in fact, maybe worse than my speculations, frankly, but that's my opinion. Hopefully, if you're watching my channel, you agree that's your opinion as well. And that you probably have speculations more aligned with me. Anyways, I'm going off on a side tangent. Now that the bodies have been discovered, Gilbert suggested the killer was in a panic state. But that was no reason to believe that he wouldn't kill again. So again, Gilbert, completely pulling it out of his own ass, says now that the bodies have been discovered, the killer is probably in a panic state. And maybe that's a speculation you can guess to, but again, this is how the jumps and the jumps and the jumps of logic continue. And again, when I do that, or any YouTuber does that, we get our balls busted for jumping to conclusions. But the experts on CNN, they get to do this all day long, every day, and get paid for it. For the ultimate expert opinion, the Daily News approached Joel Rifkin himself. Living out his days in an upstate prison, Long Island's most famous prolific murderer couldn't resist critiquing this new killer for leaving all the bodies in one place. Rifkin, at least, had been savvy enough to sprinkle his victims' remains across the tri-state area. Yet, he suspected that they had a lot in common. Growing up lonely, mocked and bullied, grappled with anger. America breeds serial killers, Rifkin said. You don't see any from Europe. We're going to talk about that in just a second. As for the victims, Rifkin said that prostitutes were obvious targets for any serial killer. No family, he explained, occasionally breaking into laughter. They can be gone for 6-8 months and no one is looking. This is not a novel insight about serial killers and their choice of victims. The Green River Killer, during his admission of guilt at this 2003 sentencing, had essentially said the same thing. Now, I just want to riff basically. Is serial killers an American phenomenon? I think it's more nuanced than that. I think that when you look at the way that America treats the news and the media cycle, it is the attention to media and other things that also contribute to why America looks like it's a hotbed of serial killers. In a lot of other countries, they don't look into serial killings the same way. They don't sensationalize serial killings the same way. And so one can argue that maybe serial killers aren't an American phenomena, but rather that other countries treat it differently and report on it differently. And America is all about sensationalism. And if they get something that they can stream together and make a sensational headline, there it goes, and it pops off, making it look like all the good serial killers come from the United States. Side rant over. In Rifkin's day, Craigslist and Backpage didn't exist. Neither did cell phones with GPS. Common sense dictate that technology would help find the killer. The original Craigslist killer, Philip Haynes Markoff, left a digital trail traceable through erotic service pages of Craigslist in Boston. He wasn't even a serial killer. He had just one victim, and he'd been found in a matter of days. How hard could it be to find a killer of 4? And again, this is kind of something that I just want to side tangent on as well. I keep thinking to myself that technology has gotten so good, we are led to believe that one could almost not possibly get away with murder nowadays. There's a million ways. They got DNA now. They can track people's DNA. They can tell your cousin's sister's uncle from a DNA sample left behind and find out who you are. There's no way to hide from, and it seems like every single era you live in, they believe that the current investigation tactics are so good nobody could get away with murder, and yet it continues to happen again. So, and I thought it was funny when they're talking about, it seems like in today's day and age you couldn't get away with this. Maybe earlier, and I'm thinking like that's the same thing that they're going to say 10 years from now about today, which is that I can't believe that people could get away with murder back then, that you wouldn't get away with that shit today because they'd just catch you. Anyways, I do a lot of side tangents, and I don't think they're good ones today. I'm not feeling on my game. I hope you're staying with me anyways. When in late January, the DNA samples from all 4 sets of remains were positively identified, the idea of a signature became impossible to ignore. Maureen Bernard Barnes, Melissa Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Lynn Costello were all about the same age. They did the same thing for a living, and they all came from other towns, some settling nearby to work. Shannan's disappearance had taken place in the middle of the timeline of the other 4. So Shannan, who they started looking for, she disappeared in the middle of these other 4 victims, so they're still thinking she's part of this killing spree. Maureen went missing in 2007, Melissa in 2009, but Megan disappeared just a month after Shannan, and Amber vanished that September. If all 5 were linked, it meant that the killer continued to abduct and murder women even after Shannan's disappearance. On January 25th, Dormer and the Suffolk County District Attorney Thomas Spoda, another person who goes to jail in this story, by the way, just as a spoiler alert, formally acknowledged that the police were looking for a serial killer. Spoda took the extra step of appealing to other women to come forward with any information about missing friends or suspicious Johns. Here's his quote. I find it very hard to believe that people engaged in the same business as them don't know something, he said. But Spoda didn't seem to understand how dramatically the business was changing or had already changed. In the Craigslist era, no one knew anyone. Pimps and madams were becoming a thing of the past. Escorts can work from a hotel with a laptop or in a car on a smartphone. Alone, a missing girl is missing only to the people who notice. The point being is that they're saying Dormer, an old cop, is thinking old cop mentality. Prostitutes have pimps. They all know each other. All the hookers work for the same guy. So one of you prostitutes needs to come forward and tell us what's going on, because you certainly know. Dormer not realizing that days have moved on past the proverbial pimp who runs a stable of hookers, because now these women are employing themselves on Craigslist and Backpage, putting their own ads out. They don't have muscle necessarily. They don't have a pimp necessarily. They work for themselves, self-employed, doing exchanges of deeds for money. Dormer's thinking old school. All of these women must know each other because they're in this trade together, but they're independents. All right. We're at 36 minutes into this video, and I know I've got a crap ton of big topics to happen. And in addition, I have a live coming up here very shortly where I'm going to be having to go to my live. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here for today's episode, if you will. I will continue this chapter later on today during the recording. And when I schedule that, I don't know. I may put it out right away. I may schedule it for next week. Point being is I'm going to wrap up today. And I want to remind you again about my channel. At Devil's Advocates, we believe in the presumption of innocence until proven guilty in a court of law. We are critical of mainstream media, law enforcement, and the judicial system. In particular, I focus on high-profile cases, and I use those cases to help educate the public about how mainstream media shapes public opinion before a person even steps foot in a courtroom. And I'm critical of law enforcement that takes steps to cover up, mislead, or even break the law at times to get a bad guy put away for something because they are convinced and playing judge, jury, and executioner who the bad guy is, and will exclude or not look at other suspects and narrowly focus on one person to put them away. That does not mean that I'm trying to get killers off the hook. Don't get that misunderstood. For those of you who get this twisted and think Devil's Advocates just wants to see every killer walk free. No, that's not what I want. What I want is cops to stop breaking the law. What I want is cops to stop using prostitutes. What I want is cops to stop having to make us ask questions. Are you the ones killing the prostitutes and covering up for the situation? Because that story is that's where this story is going.